Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about technology in practice, AI in architecture, run in association with Deltek. I'm Emily Booth, I'm editor of the Architects Journal, and I'm delighted to be joined by a stellar panel today. We've got Martha Sigari, who's Senior Partner, Head of Applied Research and Development at Foster & Partners. We're joined by Keir Regan-Alexander, Principal of Arca Works. We have Pablo Zamorano, who's Head of Geometry and Computational Design at Heatherwick Studio. And we've got Brett Tushouse, Vice President, Product Management at Deltek. Many thanks indeed to Deltek for making this webinar possible today. So what are we going to be talking about? Artificial intelligence is poised to be a massive game changer. It's already a massive game changer in all aspects of business, and the architecture profession is no exception. AI is in the news and in the national and the global conversation. Just today, AI has been named Word of the Year by Collins Dictionary, and there is an international summit at Bletchley Park exploring AI's benefits and risks. For the first time, we surveyed AJ100 practices about their use of AI and machine learning as part of our annual survey. And from a standing start, 44% are already using it to some extent. So what does AI mean now for you and your business? How and why are practices using AI? And where are the opportunities and the risks? These are some of the questions we'll explore during this webinar within the context that this is a new technology, it's moving at pace, and we are all learning about it. I'll invite each of our panelists to do a short presentation. After that, we'll have a discussion about the key issues, and then we'll open it up to Q&As towards the end of the webinar. Please do use the Q&A function to post your questions for the panel. So let's get started with the presentations. First up, to set the scene, I'd like to invite Brett Tushouse, VP of Product Management at Deltek, to present. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate that introduction there. Excited to be part of this conversation. You know, as I heard Emily introduce the panelists and I hear the title list of the other panelists, I'm very excited to hear, you know, what they're going to bring to the table. There's some very interesting titles there, and I can't wait to see what they're going to share. I wanted to start with, you know, what you could probably describe as a little bit more of a higher level overview. I think it's a good way to sort of kick off this conversation before we hand it off to the other panelists. And I think Emily made a great point there in terms of the pace at which things are moving. This screenshot or this image that I have is from a recent article that I read. It's about 3 months ago, so I'm sure this number of 72 is even higher than it was then. But this just shows you the pace at which some of this is moving right now with the introduction of ChatGPT just over a year ago now. But it's pretty exciting seeing the pace at which these things are moving when it comes to AI as we experience it at Deltek, and obviously as we observe what our customers are doing with it. And I think the other thing that's worth sort of just talking about or thinking about when it comes to what do we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence, the way we look at this at Deltek and the way we sort of interact with our customers and engage and ask them about it is, you know, essentially this is anything that a human might otherwise do that we're going to rely on a machine for doing. It could be performing a task, it could be informing a decision, it could be learning, it could be problem solving, but that's really the sort of way to look at this in terms of the very, very high level. But I think the other key thing to point out here is there's all different kinds of artificial intelligence. And with the hype that ChatGPT has created in the past year, it is sometimes easy to sort of have that dilute some of the other power that's out there when it comes to AI and more traditional machine learning and things like that. And the reason I point that out is because there's great opportunities in generative AI, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a lot today. But the other thing to make sure we focus on is the broader machine learning side of things and some of the more algorithmic oriented artificial intelligence, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. And when Deltek looks at AI across our customer base and, you know, people within the architecture industry and things like that, we really look at it at 3 levels. It's the project deliverables, the project execution and design, and firm operations. And I think it's important for firms to sort of look at things in these different categories, because each of these represents a different type of opportunity in terms of the technology you might explore, the opportunities you might explore in terms of applying AI within your firms. And on the project deliverable side, and I'm sure we will hear a lot about this from the other panelists, but this is about how you bake AI into what you're delivering to your clients, whether it be something as simple as digital twins or smart buildings or things like that, or something even further down the line in terms of energy optimization, sustainability, predictive maintenance, all of those types of things definitely leverage AI. So the project deliverable is an interesting one to talk about, because it also is an opportunity for firms to expand the type of service offerings that they bring to the market. And there could be new opportunities that firms can discover as a result of exploring how they might work AI and machine learning and whatnot into the projects that they're delivering and the deliverables within those projects. So that's a key area to focus on. And then, of course, it's the execution and design. And again, I'm sure we'll cover this more from the other panelists, but things like generative design and leveraging generative AI for design creation, the things like using natural language processing and interaction to generate designs on the fly with the various tools that are out there, as well as automating repetitive tasks. There's a lot of things that people within our organizations do that can be automated by machines now, and obviously open up time for those people to focus on more value-added things. So a lot of opportunities sort of in regards to the execution and design component. And then the last thing I would mention is firm operations. The first two items are more about project deliverables, servicing your clients, and actually executing the projects. But there's this whole other side of how you operate your business and ways that you can leverage automation, AI, machine learning, and whatnot, just to make your business processes and operations more efficient, whether that be through generating content, whether that be through more informed decision-making or more predictive capabilities. There's a huge opportunity there as well. So again, looking at the opportunities here around AI in these three different lenses, project deliverables, execution and design, and firm operations, I think is a good way to sort of break down and categorize the different opportunities firms may have when it comes to this. And certainly today, you can't talk about AI without the impact that it has on the workforce and talent and whatnot. The thought that, well, AI is going to replace all these jobs and things like that. Certainly AI will replace some tasks and perhaps some jobs that people are doing in any corporate environment today. But I think this is much more about roles working alongside AI and leveraging the technology to boost both productivity and creativity. That's how we're seeing it sort of come to life and come to reality in the firms that we talk to and what we're observing. And I think that's a great way for firms to look at it. But nonetheless, this is a valid question. And the other thing that we've seen as AI has come, storming onto the scene in the past year, it is a question that we need to think about, and you need to, have thoughtful change management around this, just to make sure your organization and your people are aware of how you look at it as a company and how it could impact the people within your organization. So definitely something to keep in mind. I guess bottom line, before I turn it over to the other panelists, tremendous potential in AI. We've seen it. We've started to bake it into our products and whatnot. It's very exciting in terms of how it can transform the AE industry. I think understanding that there's multiple types of AI. It's not just generative AI, which is, like I said, gotten all the hype in the past year. And then, the ability to think across your firm. Like I said, looking at it from the project deliverables, design and execution, and firm operations. I think it's important to look through those three lenses, because you'll find different opportunities in the different areas. And then, of course, change management, like anything that is going to have an impact on your organization as a whole. How you manage that change management component is absolutely critical to make sure you execute and deliver in the smoothest way without with the least amount of negative impact. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, this was an article that I read recently, and it had the quote in it: "Pervasive AI has begun, get going or get left behind." The interesting thing is that this is from December of 2021. Here we are 2 years later, and I think this statement is even more real and more apparent now than it's ever been. Pervasive AI is here, and it's time to get on board, or you might get left behind. So with that, I will turn it over to our next panelist.
Thank you so much, Brett, for that really illuminating take. Now I'm delighted to invite Martha Sagari, Senior Partner, Head of Applied Research and Development at Foster & Partners, to present. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you very much, Emily, and thank you for having me here and asking me to speak in this event. I have joined Foster 17 years ago, and I still feel very privileged to be in a company that exploits the potential of technology every single day and be able to speak about it. As you mentioned, I am heading the Applied R&D group, which is a close-knit group at Foster & Partners dedicated to cutting-edge research. And our backgrounds span from architecture, engineering, and software development, but the common denominator is that we're all programmers, and we're a very, very small group in the company. We usually represent 1% of the total size of the company. And we have a wide breadth and depth of expertise ranging from complex geometries and performance-driven design to operational digital twins, optimization, machine learning, you name it, we probably do it. And the question that we ask ourselves every day is, what innovations exist in the future that can help us reshape and optimize our industry today? Which is a little bit ironic when it comes to my case, because as a young architectural student, I was asked to deliver most of my academic projects using a rapidograph. And I think it's a truth universally acknowledged that at least in the past 25 years that I've been in the profession, a lot of things have changed in our industry. And at the same time, so many things have stayed the same. And that's what technology is doing for us, after all. It's just a charming underminer of our own certainty. And it's irrevocably pushing us outside our comfort zone and forcing us to rethink everything we have been taking for granted. And I see it a little bit like the white rabbit in our industry. And so like Alice in Wonderland, we can either choose to ignore it or jump down the rabbit hole where there is a lot of uncertainty, but there also exists a lot of possibilities. So when we're talking about technologies that came outside the architectural industry, but will have a profound effect for us, we can't but just have these discussions about AI and machine learning, which do have the potential, I feel, to bring unprecedented change in our profession. But change can have unpredictable consequences. And I would urge everybody to think of the iPhone, a technology nobody knew needed. And now not only it is used by everyone, but it has also reshaped the way people interact by establishing the rise of social media. And so I think the question is, what will the consequences of disruptive technologies like AI be? I think, first of all, we need to recognize that the AI is here to stay, and there are a lot of reasons why this has happened. There is the huge rise in data that we produce. The biggest product that we have right now is data, right? It's the rise on the rate of adoption of the technology and the rise in computational power. And just to put that a little bit into a framework, when we're talking about adoption, Facebook, when it came out, took 10 months to reach 1 million users. And ChatGPT, when it was introduced in 2022, reached that user count in 5 days. Also, it's interesting to know that the computational power used to train AI systems has increased by a factor of around 100 million in just the last 10 years. And we're growing way beyond Moore's law right now. Like, the technology is not duplicating its power every 20 months, but every 6 months. So we have a lot of things that are happening that make sure that this technology is going to be applied to everything that we do in the daily lives in the profession. So I think the question is, will AI replace architects? And that's what everybody keeps asking me, certainly. And I feel that the truth is that creative minds, I don't think, have anything to fear from the advent of technological revolution. Because if we play our cards right, AI is not necessarily going to replace us, but rather augment our creativity and problem-solving capacity. Because whether you're a Peter Pan fan or a Battlestar Galactica fan, and I'm both, you know that all of this has happened before and it will happen again, right? We are at the turning point akin to the creation of the printing press or the splitting of the atom. And I think more relatably to our industry, the introduction of CAD. The first thing I will urge everybody to think is how to harness AI's power. And to do that, we need to be able to control what powers it, and that is data. We are all producing an inordinate amount of data, particularly within our industry. So as an industry altogether, the first point of order should be to make arrangements in how we collect, organize, and process that data across disciplines in a meaningful manner so that we can leverage it. And also, I would urge everybody to not think AI simply by generative AI, which most people are doing right now. There are so many other ways that we can leverage the power of these types of technologies that go beyond the creative and generative side that everybody's getting super excited about, and rightly so. But it's not the main point. It's not why these technologies were developed in the first place. So I will mention some of the ways that we are using it at Foster and Partners. First and foremost, surrogate models. Surrogate models are machine learning models which were trained on huge data sets to replace slow analytical processes. And we have been developing models like that. You see a special connectivity model on the screen since the early 2020s. And with these models, we're having orders of magnitude faster predictions of what the analysis can be. So rather than waiting hours or days, we wait seconds or having the analysis in real time, and we make it accessible office-wide through plugins. In this case, you see a Rhino plugin when you can start kind of playing with the geometry, you get the analysis in real time. So you're compromising a little bit of accuracy because these models are usually 90–95% accurate, but with real-time feedback on early design stages that help you make the right decisions early on. Knowledge dissemination is another huge aspect of AI, particularly with the rise of large language models and now multimodal foundation models. And to use the power that these models bring in the company, we have been working on an AI search tool that's applied office-wide. This is deployed now in the office. And the first application around that was around our very, very valuable design guidelines. And the system we rolled out allows people to search the guides using simple queries and getting back instant answers just using natural language. And also with a level of accuracy, how certain the software is that this is the right question, but also with constant checking mechanisms with the team that is producing them. And what I was afraid that will happen just did happen, as I said. So you will bear with me as I'm trying to restart my PowerPoint. I'm sorry about that. I knew this is going to happen. It happens every single time. As I'm waiting for this to effectively restart, I would say that when we're talking about search, the search is not only around documents that are Word documents. We're extending now this search to be able to search through drawings, for example. What happens if somebody wants to draw a detail of something that they used to, we know it has been done in the past, we know it exists in the office, but we don't necessarily have it available for everybody. So through these particular tools, we are now able to go and search drawings and PDF files and see how these drawings can become available as somebody needs them without having to go to somebody and ask for that detail or having to search through a lot of different folder locations. We have also been working on developing AI-powered applications around operational data insights. So we're using these predictive models not only to better visualize and contextualize the business data that we have, but to also get better insights around that data for our board. Design assist models are also important. They can be real-time assistants and provide guidance for difficult problems in real time. And we developed models like that back from 2019 in collaboration with Autodesk, where we used artificial intelligence to predict how a passively actuated material would react to different temperature changes and hopefully be able to use it in the future for passively actuated facades. And now I'm going to what most of you must have heard about machine learning and AI, which is anything that has to do with Gen AI and particular applications like Midjourney and DALL-E. Those applications are based on diffusion models that can allow users to create images. And I will tell you very soon, not just images, but movies, 3D models, simply by using text prompts. And to that end, we have started developing applications that use ML for image generation, but directly through Rhino and through using our own models for sort of the creative basis of what we do. the reason we do that is because we want to augment rather than replace our designers' creativity. So the applications we have developed can directly make design suggestions in the Rhino viewport as our designers are changing the massing of the buildings that they have themselves created. And of course, the abilities of these models evolve constantly. And now the generated models more accurately represent context, relationships, and materials. And it is amazing how these capabilities are getting increased on a daily basis. And so as the developments in diffusion models are so rapid, today we are getting results like the ones I'm showing you on the screen, where our ML inference API that we have put in place allow us to quickly deploy and experiment with all these new models and with much more impressive results. And on top of that, we are building our own machine learning portal in the office where people can experiment in a safeguarded way with our data through these diffusion models. They can upload them for everybody to see. They can make critiques on those, and they can keep improving these models. But I think to ensure that these disruptive technologies augment rather than replace our creativity, we also need to start setting up appropriate rules of engagement. These rules need to span a lot of things like data contextualization. We're training these models, but in what data and how contextualizes that data in relation to structural, environmental, social planning criteria? We have no regulatory frameworks around AI, and we know now the UK is trying to build the AI Act, which is similar to the EU AI Act, and we'll see how this goes. There are a lot of issues around IP that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the lawsuits and the situations that are happening right now in the States. Education is very important, how we approach education, how these new technologies can be taught. We need to deal with unconscious embedded biases in the data that we have or with the data that these models have been trained on. We need to think of the ethical issues that arise through some of these models, and of course, in how we're doing upscaling of people's capabilities in order for jobs to be retained. But I think our ultimate goal is to create a workspace where technology is celebrated and becomes a catalyst for innovation and not a source of fear. And that's because while technologies like AI can assist and enhance various aspects of the architectural process, I feel that the role of the architect remains crucial because it brings on the table not only creativity and innovation, but also aesthetics, emotion, collaboration, communication, and ethics coupled with responsibility. And I think that's where I will stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martha, for that brilliant presentation. Next up, I would like to invite Keir Regan-Alexander, who's principal of ArcaWorks, to present. Thank you, Keir.
Thanks very much. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, all good.
I like in the last presentation, the rabbit hole definitely is something I feel like I've jumped down in the last year or so. Yeah, so I founded ArcaWorks in summer this year, and I'm trying to occupy this space that I see that's emerged between startups who are developing tools very rapidly for AEC, architecture practices, real estate clients whose business models are also about to change, and the practice of architecture. And I'm actually operating with all of those different organizations at the moment and transferring knowledge and innovating in between the space that I see between them. So just to give a bit of background on me, I was previously a director at Morrison Company, and I guess working on quite sort of large housing and office projects. I did health projects, education projects, private houses, so quite a broad range of different types of things, different types of scales and stuff. So this is what my working day looked like in late November last year. And then around the same time, I tried the first release of ChatGPT on the first day it was released on the 30th November, less than a year ago. Amazing to think. And we were also testing Delve, which is a Google product. Well, it's been acquired by Google, but it's a generative master planning tool. And trying these two things at the same time really changed how I was looking at my everyday work. I found it very hard to go back and look at the projects in a similar light because I could just see all of the approaches and the methods that we were using were just sort of really quite ripe for change and disruption in the next few years. And I think we're seeing that, and we're probably seeing a little bit faster than even I may have thought at that time. So when you use Delve, you put in your brief, and then it unironically tells you that it's looking for the perfect design and that it's only going to take 5 minutes. So I just think that's kind of a funny place to start. I think the previous presenters have touched on this. So there's a lot of things are being branded as AI. A lot of things are being given that label. And I actually think of it as a spectrum. So I think of it on the left, generative design as the deterministic side. So this is more stuff that we're familiar with. It's really parametricism. It's finite inputs with finite outputs that are measurable, and they're very useful for architecture. But we've also now got this new ingredient, which is being sort of opened up to the masses, which is generative AI. And that's a much more creative and indeterminate tool. So it gives a fuzzier answer, but it's quite good for creative processes. But if you think about it, they're a little bit like the rational and the creative side of the brain. And if you use them in combination, you have a really interesting new proposition that is kind of emergent in the last year. Wasn't really accessible before that, unless you were working in sort of deep R&D. So I've gone down the rabbit hole, as others have on this panel. I've tried a lot of these products out, and I've spoken to a lot of the development teams to get a sense of their roadmap and their mission. And I try and plot them on this chart, and I kind of try and keep this up to date. But these are some of the things that I've looked at and tested and think are useful for practice right now. I want to show you a quick case study. So this is something I've done recently with May. We're working on a master plan here. So to give a sense of how this works, it's their project, and I've come in and sort of co-piloted it for a short phase, for a burst of work. And it was really to validate a series of initial ideas that they had. So we're working from a sketch right at the beginning, and we're just testing different block depths. So just to try different housing typologies out in combination for a master plan. And so we've got sort of a 22-meter block, which is quite deep, 70-meter and a 12-meter, and we're just playing with those. And we managed to test 3 different options very quickly using the tools I'm going to present. There are 1,500 homes in this scheme. We did massing, layouts, areas, we did environmental analysis and carbon footprint, all in about 10 days. And this was a render that I produced from Stable Diffusion from a massing that I'm going to also show you how I made using a new tool. This is a very different, for me, a very different process to what I've been used to in sort of more traditional practice. So this is a little excerpt from Spacio, which is a generative massing tool, I guess. I think of it like parametric SketchUp, okay, because it's really easy to use. It's not, you don't have to be fluent in Grasshopper here. You're able to set parameters very simply through the UI. So building depth, grid, facades, sill heights, window heights, access arrangements, and so on. You give the plots these parameters, and then it starts generating buildings for you to then push and pull. And you can see how easy it is for me to go in and try different roof types, push and pull things around. Now, clearly this wouldn't work for building types, but things that are very prototypical, like housing or office, which are often repetitious in nature, or they have, they're based off sort of known typologies, it is very well suited for that. And we were able to test up quite, several options very fast. And as that happens, you're getting an immaculate set of areas being maintained all the way through, which is something that's way better. So I've made errors in area reporting in the past. It's quite common in architecture practice to make errors on areas. We're designers, we're not really QSs. These tools really help with that. This was the next layer I went to. So this is called Parallelo, and this is I think of this as an inside-out tool. So this is very focused on apartment planning and mix and unit typologies, and giving a client the ability to play with the brief on a given plot at scale. So you can play with numbers of apartments and mix that you want, move the dials up and down, and it's going to redraw the plan. And you can also flip different access typologies in the core, and it's using compliant layouts essentially. So this is currently accessible in Norway only. I think it's being trialed on about 100 different projects in Norway. It's soon to be in wider available in Europe and soon in the UK. This is an example of the massing that I was getting out of Spacio. These software are in beta, but you can try them early. And so what I did with that was I just started drawing over the top. So I'm very interested in a hybrid approach where you take very digital-led processes and you combine them with how we design, by hand, by model making, all the traditional things. And I love that idea of using them together and sort of going back and forth. So this is me hand drawing over the top of that massing, ideas for character zones, ideas for facades, breaking up grids. I'm thinking about access, passive overlooking at street, defensible space, green fringes, cycle routes, all those sorts of qualitative things that you wouldn't see in a sort of a generative mass, I suppose. And I use this as a control net in Stable Diffusion, and I'm rendering straight from this, which I'm going to show you now. So this was the render that I produced in Stable Diffusion from that sketch. And if you look really closely, you can see that the render has conformed to some of my wonky line work, which is quite interesting. But it gives a very vivid insight very quickly, I think, for clients and design teams to understand something of the character of the spaces that they're producing with, a good sense of light and space and scale. And here I'm able to test materiality and different ideas around that at the same time as playing with sort of strategic areas of massing. Here's Forma for environmental analysis, where I'm doing daylight compliance checks, sunlight potential checks in the courtyards, and wind discomfort. Now, this is a model that's been trained on many wind results. And so it's giving you a high degree of certainty that you're getting a correct wind result, which you would then go validate with a proper wind assessor. But you're then using that as a design tool rather than as a reporting tool. So I find that very exciting. It's like bringing good thinking very far forward in the process. Here I'm using Preoptima. This is a startup that I'm working with. Essentially you bring a 3D mass into the platform, and then it runs a pre-engineering analysis on the building shape that you've given it. So it actually goes in and estimates floor depth, beams, columns, foundation design, and it does a material takeoff. So you go from a 3D mass straight to an LCA read off, and that's a very quick process. And again, it's turning Carbon LCA into a design tool to try and make good decisions early when you're going to have the biggest impact, rather than just coming at it later when you've made all the decisions and you're just accounting for what you've done at the end, and mostly trying to post-rationalize a lot of the ideas, in my experience. So I guess the conclusion of this case study is that this is the traditional route. It's a linear process, and it has these sort of finite gateways. You go and talk to the QS, you go and talk to the fire engineer and the client, and any of those parties can send you back in time because you get new information. And you can get stuck in this testing loop. So instead, I see this much more fluid and direct route to validation. So you have an idea, you get a team together and you sprint towards validation. And that's much more of a tech approach to design development. It's very focused, and it's more collaborative in a way, and you're able to do a lot of the technical thinking that you have to wait for later. You just do it up front, and it means you don't keep bad ideas alive. You try and get rid of them as quickly as possible. So I wanted to just touch on some of the things I'm seeing in practice. I talk a lot to practices. I do workshops with practices, and I'm starting to see every practice has a different idea about how they might use these tools, which I find very interesting. Here are some of the things I'm seeing. This is what's happening today. So people are using private LLMs or ChatGPT-like tools for bid writing. That's very widespread. Report review. So if you need to synthesize or ingest a very long report and query it with natural language, LLMs are very good for that. It's very good for marketing. So Midjourney is a brilliant marketing tool, as is ChatGPT for taking long form content and translating it into a different format for different platforms. Data processing, the new GPT-4 will ingest data beautifully, and you can query it and create your own data frames from it. And then you can write code and translate it into a completely different software program. So I use using code for interoperability a lot, and copy editing. It's really brilliant for. In projects, I've shown you some of the things that I'm doing in projects and that others are starting to test out. So I think I see sort of plan generation as like a first pass. It's the alternative to a blank sheet of paper. So you start with something that is representative of a brief, and you take it from there and develop it onwards. Rendering at early stages, and really just as a creative aid, I think, to test ideas really fast. And here are some of the things that I see coming. On the practice side, I think Martha mentioned a kind of a smart intranet type query. So that's interesting that Foster's have done that, because that's something that I'm imagining lots of practices will want to do in the future, but definitely haven't done yet. So that would be, a model that's completely trained on your organization's data that you can then query in a very fluid and live way. Stage report writing, if you're working from templates, a lot of that could be produced, at least the first pass, the first draft, automatically. Fee estimation, something that I'd like to try out. If we could have a big enough data set, it would be very interesting, or resource estimation, and QMS in general. And then on the project side, building compliance, I think the Building Safety Act presents a really acute pain point for architects, one that would be very well served by generative tools to help us on that journey. We're taking a lot more responsibility in that area as architects. I think you could see engagement adopts chatbots around projects, where people can ask an AI about a project and get an instant answer to something that otherwise you're expecting them to go onto the planning portal and understand how to read area schedules. This idea of everything being live, so live carbon, live pricing, these things will be possible now, and that's really great for decision making. And the final one, early procurement. So I think the order that we'll do things will change. I think a lot of procurement can be just brought forward and market tested really early. So that'll be a big shift as well. That's the end of my presentation. If you'd like to know more, arca.works, and here's some of the other things that we're working on at the moment. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Kia. Loads of practical tips there. Now I am delighted to ask Pablo Zamorano, Head of Geometry and Computational Design at Heatherwick Studio, to present. Thanks, Pablo.
Thanks, Emily. Hopefully you all can see my slides correctly.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, so what an excellent bunch of presentation we just saw. I think there are many, many points in common that I think I will go through, but I will try to maybe showcase how we use this technology at Heatherwick Studio. So Heatherwick Studio, is this working? Yeah. So Heatherwick Studio started almost 30 years ago, and one thing that has been always constant in the work we do, it's that we don't work at a particular scale. So we can work at any scale and any location. There is no constant or common kind of ground in terms of the uses we work or focus, or there's no essentially building areas of expertise that we may like or focus more than other. And that is something that we actually embrace. And because we embrace this kind of constant ambiguity in the things we focus on, it's very interesting for us to think in what we can actually augment. There's not much repetition, let's say, but in our process, from design to delivery, and the process that we go through in the studio to actually allow for everyone to work on these amazing designs, do have some opportunities, to be explored through AI. And we are currently focus our research and development on some of these areas. For instance, in design, we're thinking in kind of the common task that we usually kind of focus on a daily basis, and most of our designers kind of spend hours and hours trying to do things like really simple things like photoshopping, or rendering, or analyzing models, to also understanding how we do things in the studio, how we spread, the knowledge, and how we share these insights, how we get to understand how we're doing as a business. These areas where we think we can kind of quickly jump into AI. We kind of started using tools like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and Deltek as soon as they got out, and they were super exciting for us. Obviously, it was a quick way to get really interesting images. But one thing that also happened was that we quickly realized that most of the outcomes were quite generic, and you couldn't kind of tailor them. It was actually quite hard to tailor them in the way that you may like. But that being said, we realized that it was very simple to use this tool to do some other random tasks, that no one wants to do, like generating assets, with a white background, so you can just Photoshop them on top of kind of whatever rendering you're working on, or working on different patterns because it tiles automatically for you. So all these things start to appear like very useful cases to use kind of off-the-shelf software, in a more kind of tailored way. But for us, what's really important to think it really in the way that we like it. So how do we get it there? The first thing that we did was kind of trying to get these tools to be part of our own softwares, or sorry, the software that we use for design, so particularly Rhino and similar softwares. And again, it was quite interesting to start kind of looking into these alternatives, but it was always kind of the question back about how can we actually make them either drive the modeling process in the way we like, or the end result in the way we kind of expect. And the same for kind of 3D. This is a year old already, but some experiment we did with Orton Tomasetti, using kind of prompt to 3D. Now I'm supposed that with technologies like Gaussian splat, we're just a moment ago to see really high quality outputs. So this is supposed to be a stack of chairs, by the way. So very interesting. You can see something out, but it's not quite there yet. And it's all about how can you get it, to work in the way you want, how you control it, and so how you get that level of control in the tools that you want to use, and as Martha well mentioned, for AI, data is key. And because we've been out, for almost 30 years, there is a bunch of data that we can leverage, inside the studio. Images is one of them. And because the design part of this is something that we already kind of understood the real value of it, we say, okay, well, if we take one of those images, we label it, we start training a model with it, then we can actually validate it and turn it into something quite powerful. And if we do that, several 100,000 of times, all of a sudden, our tools actually understand much better how we do things, and we can jump from something that is generic off the shelf to something that is completely tailored to our own way of doing things. That being said, now with the tool that we currently have that is fully customized in our data set, based on our database, we can start from something like a sketch, as kind of Kier was showing us, but then have a rendering right away that does not only look kind of nice, but actually looks like the renders we like to have, and actually talks to the architectural context that we want to kind of talk to about. Or if we start from amassing, we can go the other way around, right? From amassing to kind of a sketch mode, or kind of a watercolor, and it will do it in the way we like to express that. Or if we want to test different materialities and we want to start from our models, then we will be testing different materials that we know that work, that we have tried on other projects, or at least we know that are kind of leading towards a sort of kind of visual expectations that we love in the studio. And again, we try to kind of send all this kind of knowledge back into the tools we use, so we can access them very quickly and in a consistent way. So for us, we're in a moment where we use these tools in a kind of in a really fast way, to get kind of some things that sometimes look too much like our own designs, and sometimes a little bit less, but tools like this for us are great provocations for starting design conversations and taking them forward. And this is obviously not the only way that we're doing this, so we also produce other types of data, as for instance, Marta was kind of pointing at, this is a tool that we based on Cody and is reading all our kind of Revit kind of information in the studio, and someone is asking just like how can create a filter or something like that, and then it will kind of go and find the right answer tailored for you, display it, and send you a link if necessary to kind of the information where the information sits. And we're also working on as part of our internal wiki channel to have again kind of automatic access to any project input and past kind of lessons learned in the studio. Now, all this is great, but I think what is greater is actually when these tools get used. And we have a small group of people that is quite interested in AI at the moment in the studio, and they are helping to kind of learn more, develop more, and then spread kind of the love with everyone else in the studio. And this is where these things actually can become disruptive just for one particular studio, and I think this is also one of the keys for everyone else, to kind of start using this and for the industry to kind of get disrupted by something like that. Now, we don't know everything. We're not expert, and I very much doubt that, you know, there are many experts about this, you know, in our industry at the moment. We're pretty much all learning, you know, and I think what is really exciting is that there's so much happening that is always something new kind of to pick your brain. And it's important to kind of team up, you know, to get more people that is interested in other things, you know. So we're working with engineers and developers from outside the studio as well, you know, to learn more. And we're very much interested to open this conversation with everyone else in the industry. So if you are interested in this, want to kind of take this to the next level, you know, get in touch, because this is, I think, what we're here for. So thanks.
Thank you so much for that brilliant presentation and that opportunity, that invitation to engage as well, Pablo, there, which really resonates. So I'm mindful of time here, but I think it would be great if we just have a quick conversation between us and then open it up to answer some of the wider Q&As that are coming through at the moment. Pablo, if I could start with you, because that really kind of engaged, I think, resonated with the audience here. This idea that we're very much learning about this technology. It's important to engage with it, and also the importance, it seems, that your studio is placing on perhaps individuals within the studio who can really bang the drum for it and be excited about it. How would you put it to another practice, perhaps a smaller practice, if they want to get started with using this technology? What should they do? What might be the first steps for changing the culture of their practice and really getting engaged and involved?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Probably Keir had some very good insight about how you can actually do this, because there is so much tools that are out there, you know, that could be kind of useful to get started, that I think the way in can be quite kind of fast. Now, that being said, because there's so much things happening and so many apps kind of around, it can be also a bit like too much, you know. So it's difficult to filter out which ones are actually working, which ones say that work but don't work. And I think having these conversations with other people that is currently using them, I think is the perfect way to kind of to start. I think from that point on, I think that if there is one thing that is really good with AI, is that, you know, the interfaces of the interaction between kind of the technology and the person that is using is quite straightforward and is very human-like, you know. So I think that's why it gets picked up so rapidly. I mean, I think the fact that as you, Emily, mentioned, that 44% of, you know, AJ 100 practices are already using it, you know, it's very telling, you know. And I don't think the trend is gonna change. You know, if anything, it's gonna get more and more people using it. You know, it's based in language, and it's our natural way of communicating with each other. So yeah, I think it's just about trying at the moment and having these conversations with as many people as you can.
Thank you so much. Keir, if I can pick up with you, it was really interesting to hear you talk about the sustainability potential of this. And I know that you had a few slides about that. That's such an important topic for many practices. Have you got any advice or hints and tips on how practices might focus on sustainability on their projects, and perhaps use some of these tools to maximum effect?
Yeah, so the tools that I'm using are, I think they're more generative design tools. So models that have been trained on data sets that give quite that run sort of deterministic analyses. So simply the product I was showing was Forma, which is an Autodesk platform. It's within the AEC license. If you buy Revit and AutoCAD, you probably have access to that. And that has a lot of really good environmental analyses in it. So you can do your daylighting, sunlight potential, wind, and many other things in there. And I think what we'll see is then more specialized tools being built that plug into that. So Preoptima is the one I mentioned that I'm involved in. And that's really just focusing very deeply on embodied carbon. So yeah, I think there's tools out there that can really help. Yeah, they're doing things that you would have been quite complicated to do a year ago, and would have required quite special plugins for each specific purpose, and you'd have to have someone in the office that could use it. Whereas what I like about the stuff that's coming through is it's pretty accessible. It's not that difficult to use. It's all been wrapped in a nice sort of UI essentially. So it's they're not that difficult to use. You just need to be interested in going and trying it. I think some of the stuff Pablo said was absolutely right, which is in terms of adoption, I think organizations need a working group in almost any organization. I feel like it's a big enough and substantial enough issue that you need to have a strategic plan, and you need a group of people in the office that are going to lead the plan, and are going to take some time out of their week to actually engage and try stuff that's outside of the standard sort of box. And I think it's really good if that's not just subcontracted to like a tech team or to a BIM team. I think it needs to come from the top. I think you need like strategic design leadership, understanding these tools, because it's going to change the creative process. And so you need to be in control of that. And I think, you mentioned 40% of practices using it. That's the ones that admit to using it. So what about all the people who are using it that aren't admitting to using it? So there's a lot. I saw something last week, which was like, I can't remember the percentage. A lot of employees are using ChatGPT at work, and their employee doesn't know, and they don't have an AI policy. So, and who knows what data they're sharing with OpenAI, right? So that you have to have a plan, you have to have some boundaries, so that people can play and learn stuff and experiment.
Thank you. Such pertinent points there. And actually, Martha, this is something that you mentioned in your excellent presentation as well. This idea of what you put into this is going to affect what you get out, so it's the kind of, if you put a high level of data in, you might get something better out of this, the garbage in, garbage out idea. I'm interested if you could speak a little bit to that point in terms of around how how practices might manage their data with that, because you talked a lot about data, and then also around IP. Is there a risk here? And how is that mitigated?
Well, I think there's a huge risk here, right? Most people are using these things. They don't know what they're using. They don't know what they're uploading. And it's shocking to me that people using Midjourney do not realize that in the T's and C's of Midjourney, it says that everything that is created through Midjourney effectively belongs to me. They have full IP on the outcome of these images that they can reuse with no problem whatsoever. So if you upload something in Midjourney that you have created, that you have IP over, and that it is, let's say, confidential, that's a really bad thing to do, right? So people don't do it. I think there is everybody, that's a big problem, right? That the adoption is huge. People are start using these things because they're exciting. They do not understand the dangers behind that. We do have an AI and ML policy that our legal department has been working for some time. We have particular ways of dealing with these things, and we want to say, okay, that's why we're using these things in-house in a way that we can safeguard the data that we're using, we can safeguard the IP as we want it, and we can make sure that people can use them in a more secure environment, not just for us, but also for our clients, and also in a way that safeguards us. We very rarely be using Midjourney images to show to clients, right? And if we do, we need to say that, because there are other issues in that level as well. I think it's a very interesting proposition when you start thinking, okay, how much data do I have and what can I do with that data? And if you start thinking the level of organization that data requires and the level of tagging that it requires in several levels for it to be useful, I will only tell you that for some of the surrogate models that we have been running, it was easier for us to create generative models that were analyzed in real time and create hundreds of thousands of options to train our ML models, rather than to find data from within the office, from a 55-year-old office, right? Because that's how difficult it is to do these things the right way. And so that is something that people do not understand. And they do not understand that if they start using it kind of blindly on the data they have without this being managed in an appropriate way, they're not going to get back the answers that they want. Also, It's not just the data that you get, it's the model that you're using that data on. There are some models that are much more improvisational than others. ChatGPT 3.5, like half of the things it says, it's like, it went like 90% was great, great, great. And then like the 10% was so wrong. But because it was hidden in all this like great stuff, it was everybody thought, oh, that's great. Well, it's not. ChatGPT 4 it's much, much better. There are other things out there that you can effectively specify how much you want them to improvise or not, like Elasticsearch. It's important for people to understand that there are a lot of models out there that are training different data. There are now a lot of multi-model models that are going to create a lot of interesting upgrades in what we're seeing, where you don't really need to train it to a huge amount of data. You only need to give it a few examples of what you want, and it can come back and it can give you an answer. These foundation models are growing immensely. So there is the data that you're using, there is the understanding of how you're using it, there is the model that you're using behind that data, there is an entire framework that needs to happen on a company per company basis, and there is a framework that needs to happen on an industry basis that is, again, non-existent. I've seen many questions that have to do around, for example, what happens with smaller offices. The EU AI Act has frameworks around that says, if you're in the EU, you're a smaller office, you can pull your data, you still retain IP on that data, but then you can have models trained on that collective data that you can use, right? I don't know how far this is going to go for the UK, but there are ways of doing it. But there needs to be some industry-wide frameworking, and currently we don't have any.
Very pertinent points there, Martha. Thank you. And some real food for thought there, to be honest. Brett, if I can just come to you. You said in your presentation, AI will empower, not replace, which seemed a really positive line there. But it would be great to know just a little bit from you. What are you hearing from the practices you work with about what they're really venturing into at this point now, sort of practically in terms of AI? What are the key things you're hearing from the practices you speak with?
Yeah, I think I would probably list three key things. I think the first one, and I can't remember, I think it was Pablo or Kira that mentioned it, but the marketing side of things. In fact, I was at an event last week here in the States it was called AEC AI, and it was hosted by a marketing organization that really focused on how firms can use mostly generative AI to, create content, review content, summarize content, that sort of thing. So I think in terms of, if you think of sort of a low-hanging fruit where firms can start, I think that's a great place to start. The thought of generating blog posts and things like that, and leveraging these tools to do that, I think is probably one of the key things that we're seeing in our organizations. Now, to Martha's point, if 10% of it is wrong, you can't just take it as is and publish it. You need to review it and make sure it's all right. But boy, it's a great starting point that can save a bunch of time. I think the second area that we're seeing probably the most traction at this point is around automation. And this is a little bit less generative AI focused, and more sort of using machines to replace something a human would otherwise do. But that automation component to supplement repetitive tasks, more mundane tasks, manual and data entry, that type of thing. I think, again, that's one of those low-hanging fruits where a lot of organizations can start and leverage a lot of common tools that are out there, whether they be from Deltek or other providers that, again, can add that automation component. And then I think the third area we're seeing, and certainly this is a little bit more relevant to the Deltek domain, but the third area we're seeing most commonly leveraged right now is anomaly detection. If you think of accounting, finance, and those sorts of things, a lot of data is reviewed, and to the point that a few people made, we're generating a massive amount, or these firms are generating a massive amount of data that we can leverage to, point out anomalies, whether it be in expense reports or timesheets or other finance and accounting related data sets, to point someone to, hey, this may need some attention, this may be wrong, this may have been entered incorrectly, before it becomes a problem further downstream. So I think content generation, automation, and anomaly detection is probably the areas that we're seeing most common right now, because like I said, these are sort of low-hanging fruit items.
Thank you so much. So conscious of the time, we've got about 5 more minutes here, so we're going to go to some of these excellent questions in the chat. I think this one has resonated. What advice would you give to an architecture student about adopting AI into their learning journey? Who'd like to take that one? Perhaps Kia, do you want to go to that?
Yeah,
What advice
sure.
would you give to an
I
architecture
have
student?
opinions on everything, so don't worry.
Yeah, go for it.
I think one of the advantages students probably have is that they're going to be entering the profession potentially knowing more about this stuff than practitioners. And so I think a lot of the change that will come will probably be driven from new graduates coming in. It would be my expectation. Having said that, I would have a little bit of caution around that. If you're learning, just make sure that you do the work of understanding architectural design in a fundamental way, and that you understand the holistic nature of architecture. There's a tendency for generative, like diffusion tools, to turn architecture into a veneer that's very image based, and that worries me slightly in the context of university. I think I would worry about a kind of cohort of graduates who are just image obsessed, and they haven't thought about architecture in a more spatial, volumetric, programmatic, social way. So I think new tool, really powerful, know how to use it, because you might find that you know it better than people in practice when you get in there, but make sure you do the hard work of learning architecture.
I don't think it's like on the students are students. They will take on everything. The problem isn't the educators. I'm an associate professor at UCL. I can tell you there is a huge issue on how these technologies are being approached. I see the courses that exist out there. I'm not talking about UCL now, I'm talking in general. And they are image obsessed, and they're teaching you effectively how to do prompt engineering. So if you want to be an architect, you need to decide whether you want to be an architect or a writer. If you want to be a writer and do prompt engineering, then maybe be a writer rather than an architect, right? So I think it becomes an educational issue rather than a student issue. Students should look at anything, they should be using anything, but they should understand what they're using. I think the problem is they don't, and nobody helps them to.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Good point, good points. Pablo, I wonder if I could come to you for this one. It's quite a big question, but interested in your take. What are the main downfalls? We've heard a lot about the pros, some risks as well. But do you have a main downfall that you're aware of, or you're thinking about with AI?
Yeah, I think there can be quite a few. I mean, one of the kind of tricky things that happen with AI is that essentially you very easily lose control of what you're doing, and it's so key to understand what you want to get out of whatever that you're doing with the technology, in order for kind of it to actually serve the purpose that you want. That a lot of people kind of get more interested in just using it, rather than understanding what is coming out. And I think that can be quite dangerous because, as someone mentioned, everything that you get out from these tools tends to look good. Same happened with kind of LLMs models, where everything that gets out kind of sounds good. It sounds smart, and you don't understand that the model may be just representing a 3-year-old. So I think understanding what you want to get out from this tool is super key in order for them not to fail. I think another kind of one of the areas where we should all be aware of these things is not by kind of trusting. I mean, it's really important to have people that kind of cares about this technology in the studios, but I think this doesn't kind of end there. I think just starts there. I think there should be kind of a general awareness of the type of tools that you want to use, why you want to use them, and how you can use them. The other thing, I think Marta also mentioned this, but to get these models to behave in the way you want, especially when you want to tailor them, they require a lot of data, and that requires a lot of time. So when you commit to kind of tailor one of these models, you have to understand that it will take a long time for you. That's why I'm also kind of pro collaboration, because I think Keir showed Delft at some point, and we spent actually quite a long time working with Delft, where when they were, well, it was Sidewalk Lab at the time when they were kind of developing the tool. So we were using one of our projects, large projects, to actually build the tool with them. And I think that helps a lot. So we knew what we wanted the tool to do, and then they knew what to actually work on in terms of development. I think that level of awareness is key.
Thank you so much. So in our last 2 minutes, just a quick fire question, I reckon, just to get a real sort of sense check of summary of all this, really. Top tips. Brett, you had a top tip for practices working with AI. What would that be?
It's going to be somewhat repetitive of what was said earlier, but I think starting with a task force, I think a few of us mentioned that, but organizing a group that's a very diverse from experience, education, et cetera, and letting them attack, really carving out time for them to do it, not sort of in their free time, but dedicated time to determine what a firm can leverage from an AI perspective and how they can start making progress on there. I think being deliberate about that task force is absolutely key.
Excellent. Martha, top tip from you.
I think know what data you have and organize that data properly. Have an AI and ML legal framework in your office. Ensure that you understand what you're using for what purpose. Do not be kind of swept away by the fad, but just try to understand how this particular things, because they're nice and they have promise, use them because you have a case study that needs this particular tool, because otherwise you end up using things that are useless. You spend a lot of money and you're not really achieving much.
Good point. Keir, top tip from you.
I would say don't assume this is just like another CAD program or BIM issue, and therefore don't give it to that team that you usually give this stuff to on their own. They need to be involved, but this is an organization-wide issue. You need to think about it, about your whole process, and you need leadership involved. It's not, I don't think it's something you should just sit on the sidelines and say and assume that you can delegate it to a specific group. I think you need it's going to touch all parts of your organization, basically. So I think you need a holistic view.
Thank you. And Pablo, top tip.
I think I'll go with embrace the change. Go for these tools. They're not going to go away, and learn about them. Learn, what they do, how they work, and think then what you need to use them for. But totally embrace them.
Thank you. It's a game changer, and it feels like this discussion is going to run and run. So that just about wraps up today's webinar on AI and architecture. Really hope that you've enjoyed it and found it as illuminating as I have. I'd like to thank our fabulous panelists, Martha, Keir, Pablo, and Brett, for their insight and expertise. Thank you. Many thanks once more to Deltek for making this webinar possible. Thank you to you, our audience, for joining today. A recording of the session will be available soon. Please visit the AEGA website to find out more. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.